Hi, I have kind of let this channel die because I haven't uploaded in this channel to this channel a while, and because I don't know, I don't care about it. But with all this pandemic shit going on, I have been seeing a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation and general shit like that, so I feel like I have to address it. So just it's just been some frustration, and I've been commenting and I've been doing this, but I feel like I could just make a video with my shitty, like I don't even have a proper computer anymore because my poverty's been getting worse and all this other stuff. So this is just shitty, like with my tablet which has like the worst screen protector covering up the webcam, so like that's why the video quality is so poor. And right now I'm making like food, so that's why I think you can see a little bit of steam here. So I was like itching to rant at somebody about something, so this is very informal. I apologize. But yeah, so that minute of my video out of the way, let's talk. So a lot of the time with what's going on, you've been seeing, stuff. I've been seeing a lot of, with all the pandemic shit going on, a lot of people comparing what's going on right now to pandemics of the past, which, is fair enough. And because, you look to the past for guidance and on how you should act or react, or what to do. How did they handle things? What did they do wrong? What did they do right? And all this other stuff. But also even just as a, reference or whatever, a reference point as a sort of cultural thing. Now, one that is getting referenced, there are two main ones that are getting referenced a lot, because there have been many pandemics in human history, but there are two that are getting referenced a lot. The Spanish flu and the bubonic plague. Spanish flu I will get into later on, but right now I'm going to talk about the bubonic plague because it happened first and it's easiest to, address. So the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death or the Black Plague by some people kind of mix up the names, or just generally the plague. It's the one that has that like plague thing going on. So that's the one that's the big one, that's the big plague. I think it's like the worst pandemic in human history. It wiped out anywhere from a third to half of Europe's population. It was bad. So a lot of people, I've been seeing people saying things though that's just a little inaccurate, saying if that was around today, it would be devastating with the whole, globalization, international travel, all this other stuff. But here's the thing, it is. Like, the disease that caused, like the bacteria that caused the bubonic plague, didn't go away. I mean, humanity, that's an important thing to remember, is that humanity has only effectively eradicated one disease, and that is smallpox. So every other disease, keep in mind, it's still around. Okay, so if it's not smallpox we're talking about, it's still around. Keep in mind though, now, before you start freaking out, like, oh my god, we have this, coronavirus shit, and now we have, the bubonic plague is still around somewhere. Don't worry. Bubonic plague, because of modern medical practices, we see like 20 cases roughly a year. That is minute. That is like barely, the reason why you don't hear about it anymore is because that is infinitesimally small, okay? Like, just for reference, something, a disease in general, like in terms of just any kind of disease, no matter if it's, bacterial, viral, fungal, genetic, parasitic, like no matter what kind of disease it is considered a rare disease if 1% of the population or less has it. 1% of the population is in the hundreds of millions, okay? Like, it's because we have, just shy of, because we're 7.8 billion, so that's like, just shy of 8 billion people on this planet. So 20 people, I know 20 people, like, and like that's in the entire freaking globe. That's infinitesimally small. So don't worry, it's you're not going to get the bubonic plague, and if you do, you just take some antibiotics, because it's a bacterial infection. So that's why it's been, a lot of people have been going like, oh, polio's the next one we're going to beat, and then all this anti-vaxxer shit, which I will get into. But It's no, like it's actually likely going to be something like bubonic plague that's actually more realistically going to be the next one we wipe out. And yes, smallpox was wiped out by vaccines, and vaccines are important, but it is in the modern age. The thing is, it does tend to be, since germ theory came around in the late 20th, or not 20th century, late 19th century, so late Victorian age. It has been primarily viral infections, so diseases caused by viruses that have been the ones causing these pandemics and even epidemics. And that's because bacteria is so much easier to fight. Even before we had, like the last one that really caused issues. Last one that really caused issues was syphilis, and that's obviously still around, and that's because it's not, so simple as like, wash your hands and whatnot, and sanitation. Because the thing is that once germ theory came around, first of all, it caused a panic because everyone's like, there are these teeny tiny things and they can kill me and whatever. Because you have to think, back before we knew what germs were, we just, understood, the world is like, if you can see it, you can detect it with your, the five senses, which, to be clear, there's more than five senses. But if you could detect it with the five senses, it was real. But if you couldn't, it wasn't real. It didn't exist. So, there's these, these people who suddenly there's these things that we can't perceive. And so, like, there was also this stuff, like all these disinfectants and, household cleaners and all this other stuff, became a huge thing. And I apologize, I'm making pasta. I'm just a second. So yeah, these household cleaners and everything and disinfectants and all this other stuff became huge because, everyone was terrified of all these diseases. Now, hygiene to the quality that we see it today didn't become a thing so much until a little later on, but it was starting then. And this was also around the time of period that, medicine and, healthcare and medicine as we know it was also starting. This is when nurses started becoming a thing. This is when washing your hands, like even doctors washing their fucking hands was a thing. And the guy who first came up with that, who first was like, hey, maybe doctors should wash their hands, like, ever, especially between autopsies and delivering babies. Like, maybe that's a good idea, and here's all these statistics to back it up about, because we do that at my hospital, and, like, look, the death rates are, like, so much lower. He was harassed and mocked and ridiculed and just treated like utter shit to the point that he had a nervous breakdown and died some years later in an asylum. Like, so with that backdrop, you can understand how the bubonic plague, something that nowadays is just such a minor bacterial infection that is so easily prevented and treated and all this other stuff, that only 20 people on average every year ever have it. So, but back in, the era that it actually was causing problems, hand washing wasn't as much of a thing. Proper sanitation, not as much of a thing, except among a certain population. And this population literally wasn't hit as hard by the plague. And countries that had more of these people, or these people at all, because there's some countries that had completely exiled them, weren't hit as hard by the plague. And the countries that had none of them were hit the hardest. Who are these people? Jewish people. I'm serious. And for all of you anti-Semites who are all like, conspiracy or whatever, they literally, because of their cultural practices, you may have heard of kosher food and whatever, and part of the whole thing of it isn't, like, some people know, it's like, oh no, Jewish people have to prepare it, but it's also how they have to prepare it, and if you look at the basic things of kosher, you have to wash your hands before handling food. You can't, if any sort of, like, surface or cooking utensil or anything like that has touched meat, you have to fully sanitize it, like, wash it and everything else before you can use it again, especially for anything else. So that's not meat. And you have to, like, all sorts of things like this, and nowadays that's just common sense. That's basic, sanitation practices, avoiding cross-contamination and avoiding all this stuff. But back then, you had to have it as an actual cultural practice to actually do that. So you actually notice that, like, countries like, Great Britain, or UK nowadays, where there were no Jewish people, hit super hard by the plague. Countries that had Jewish people in ghettos, those ghettos not hit so hard, but the rest of the country was hit pretty hard. But countries like Poland, where Jewish people were well integrated in the community and everything, they had much lower rates overall. And so it was literally just wash your goddamn hands. And even the plague doctor outfit that's very famous, with the beak and everything. The idea behind that, because some of you again, well, that's preventing the spread. It was accidental because they thought it was the smells. Like I said, the five senses. If they thought it was this bad smell, because when you're sick, you smell bad, and that's probably an evolutionary thing for us to avoid. Just we probably have an adverse reaction to things that are gross. Because hey, that's disease. And even I think if you I remember lately I've been looking up a bunch of stuff about disease because pandemic's making me anxious. Anyways, and seeing these pictures of people who had smallpox and and I realized, hold on a second, that looks like the trypophobia kind of things, like the things that will trigger trypophobia. And I have to wonder if trypophobia is an evolutionary thing to get people to avoid people who have those sores all over them, like people who were avoidant of that were or even just an epigenetic sort of thing of their ancestors for years, for generations upon generations were no, and then not just smallpox, every other kind of pox really. So there's that. But yeah, so bacterial infections, like I said, aren't causing the same issues that they used to. And syphilis, was the last major one, because that was so major, it was affecting fashion choices. Sunglasses have been around for hundreds of years, but it was so prominent of an issue that people were literally forgoing wearing sunglasses because the apparatus worn to hide the effects of syphilis, like the rot that was happening in your face, included sunglasses. So they didn't want to be mistaken because, how do you get syphilis, right? As someone wearing that. It wasn't until Hollywood came about and people were wearing sunglasses to protect their eyes from the bright flash bulbs. So, and where did syphilis come from, Mr. CPG Gray and knowing better? The Americas. It was literally it got gained in prominence, and you saw the first cases in 1497, 98 in UK, but then it really gained prominence in the 1530s and 40s. What was also happening in those years? It just appeared then, right? And it was known as the French pox because that was where it really happened, in the 1530s and 40s. Let's take a look. Well, John Cabot discovered some Newfoundland, Anyways, in 1497. Well, that's interesting for England. Jolly old Britain. And then Jacquetier, was now Quebec. He actually came up with the name Canada because of a mistranslation. So, Canada. In 1534. Ain't that some shit? It was from the Americas. Considering how that's transmitted, you gotta wonder what was going on. But anyways, we all know colonialists aren't the nicest people, but I digress. If you keep paying attention to the history of the world, then you see some shit going on, and it was ravaging Europe. So yeah. It was to the point where, if anyone was dying of something and they didn't know what was causing it, they just kind of probably syphilis, I don't fucking know. Here, let's take your blood out because we just don't know how to medicine. Anyways, because until the whole modern era of medicine started, towards the end of the, when that germ theory was starting to happen and everything, people were doing the four humors and crap like this. Hell, even when the first vaccine was invented by Edward Jenner in the late 1700s. Which, by the fucking way, all this stuff about chemicals and it's unnatural and whatever. Do you know what the first vaccine is? It was cowpox. That's it. It was literally giving people cowpox, and that's it. All of your pox parties and stuff like that. You would like the original vaccine. Hell, the word vaccine comes from the word vacca, which is Latin for cow. And in fact, when the Spanish flu hit, there were literally two vaccines that were in existence, and they were for smallpox and rabies. And that's it. That's another one. Rabies is like, really uncommon. They're even vaccinating, it's so uncommon in humans that they are regularly vaccinating animals to prevent the spread to humans. Like, wild animals, they're vaccinating wild animals by, putting the vaccine into, food, and then that the animals would like to eat, like treats and whatnot, and then checking populations and making sure the vaccination rate is above 90 at least 95%, which is the rate you need to have that protection. Anyways, so the Black Plague, Black Death, or sorry, the Black Death. I'm mixing up the terms. That's not comparable for what's happening now, because it's not going to happen again. So Spanish flu, much more recently, it's a virus and all this other stuff. I found something weird is when I was looking into it, when I found stuff before that was made before the coronavirus outbreak, the COVID-19 and everything else. To be clear, COVID-19 is the disease it causes. It's not the name of the actual virus. It's like SARS-CoV. I don't know. Anyways, this novel coronavirus, and novel means new, by the way, and that's the thing that if it's new, it's likely to cause a pandemic because we don't have anything for it. We have no vaccines, we have no treatments, we have nothing, especially if it's not a flu, because in the modern era we now have antivirals, and for especially flus, because there's so many strains of the flu that we have Tamiflu. That's good for pretty much all of them. That isn't to say they still can't cause a pandemic, and I'm going to get into that because some of you might remember the most recent one. So the one that caused the pandemic in 1918 was H1N1. So some of you might be going, wait a second, that sounds familiar. Yeah, because that was also the one that caused the pandemic in 2009, which some of you might be going, the pandemic, that was, come on, that was barely anything. Yeah. Because we had Tamiflu, we have vaccines, we have all kinds of stuff for it because it's not novel. When it's novel, we have to quarantine, we have to do all the shit we're doing right now because we have nothing. So all you anti-vaxxers, you know how you're bitching about how we can't interact with people, we can't do anything. That's what happens when that's what we have to do. We have to take these measures when there is no vaccine. You can only interact with people and, risk encountering this shit when there's a vaccine to protect you. Because that's why we were having pandemics all the fucking time beforehand, because we didn't have this shit. And that's why vaccines were such an important thing. Even before vaccines existed, there were other inoculation methods. And to be clear, vaccination and inoculation are two different things. So, this is a thing. This is what life is like without vaccines. Do you like it? Because I don't. It sucks. And H1N1 was novel. We had nothing for it because we didn't have anything for the flu either, because the flu was just kind of something you got and you had to deal with, and it could kill you, but and part of why it was so devastating was because it was killing people that normally aren't that affected, people, young adults, like adults in the prime of their life, like 20 to 40, not young adults, but like adults in general, 20 to 40, right? So because of the fact it was causing these cytokine storms, which was causing their own immune system to turn against them. So if you had a really strong immune system, you're actually more likely to die. But also, if you had no immune system, you would also die because the virus would just kill you. It was kind of a mess. Anyways. But also, I've been noticing, the thing I've been noticing about before this whole coronavirus thing happened is that stuff from before talks about how it originated in Kansas. Some pig farm in Kansas was likely where it came from, and then that was really close to the military base, and because where the first case ever was, and then the troops took it off to etc. But then it's so there was some theorizing that it came from China, or it was stewing around in Europe for a while and just was getting missed or something, and that just they didn't know, but historians poring over it, all of the possible records, pretty conclusively say that. But now suddenly everyone's talking about how it came from, or kind of ignoring that possibility it was doing around in Europe, even though that's just as much of a possibility as the Chinese one. It's held to the same by these experts, but now they're saying, because China's where all the diseases come from. So it's China that, even though it's pretty agreed upon that it came from Kansas, aka a place in the States. It came from the States. So I find that kind of fucking interesting. To the point where I've even seen places some videos even in places saying Oh no, it definitely came from China. Like, not even saying like it could have come from China, it could come from here. Like, some people think it came from China, or like it probably came from, or even just it probably came from China. No, it definitively came from China. No. I mean, the strongest evidence we have is that it came from that stupid pig farm beside the military base. Like, that's why it's called swine flu, for fuck's sakes. Anyways, and also, I've also seen some people saying, that same video, by the way, said that washing your hands wasn't effective, which, to be clear, washing your hands for 20 seconds is very effective against viruses, not bacteriophages, because those are the ones, by the way, you know, viruses, you may have seen two different images of viruses that are like the little blob with the little thing sticking out, and then viruses that have the little like diamond head and then the stick and the little legs. So the ones that have the little blob with the whatever, those are the ones that make us sick. And then the ones that are like the diamond head, whatever, those are bacteriophages, which you might be confused by the name. They're the ones that infect bacteria, that's why they have that name, to the point that they're actually being looked at as a possible treatment for antibiotic-resistant bacterial infections. Because that's the thing that's happening. But we're not going to get into that. That would cause a pandemic, because fuck. Anyways, I didn't even, until now, I've just been so focused on the virus shit. Oh my god. That's a thing. Anyways, so we don't have to worry about that right now, though. We don't have any stuff for that right now. It's being well contained at the moment. There's no novel bacteria, because those tend to evolve a little bit more linearly, I think. I don't know. I haven't been looking as much into the bacteria. We're not gonna panic, think about that, Kai. Anyways, so yeah, but the part why that works, soap is just as effective as alcohol, by the way, if you're washing your hands for 20 seconds. But even if you're washing your hands for less, it still is going to get some of it, because the soap has this, the chemical properties of soap is that it bonds to, it causes, because you know, you put water and oils or any kind of fats together, they don't mix. They're like, we don't like each other, whatever. But what soap does is that it grabs onto the fat and it grabs onto the water, like in the on molecular level, to be clear. And it's like, we're gonna have a party. And so then it's holding onto both ends. So that's why it ends up working. Because that blob that we're seeing, that's the lipid sheath. So lipid, if you don't know, is just fat. And oils are basically liquid fats, okay? So it's bonding to that liquid sheath, and so it's grabbing onto that liquid sheath, and it's grabbing onto the water that you're rinsing away with, and going, and we're gonna tear you apart and completely destroy the virus, you know, the little viral teeny tinies. So it's obviously not that big, but like, you know what I mean. And you know, it's ripping the virus apart. So, and then obviously with the rubbing and everything, and it's important to get like between your fingers, make sure you wash your thumbs, you know, get all the way down to the wrists, and you know, that, you know, make sure you're washing your hands correctly. My hands are so dry because I've been washing my hands so much. But alcohol obviously just kills, you know, these things. But, and in fact, having a super high percentage is not necessarily better, because of how fast it evaporates. It doesn't have a chance, which is actually why they have like 70%. They don't just, you know, put you with like 100% all the time, because it evaporates too fast. It's yeah, you know? So, yeah, so, and I've seen some people going like, in that video that said, definitively it was China, they were saying this washing your hands. It is effective against influenza viruses. It's effective against all viruses that aren't bacteriophages, but we don't want to kill bacteriophages, because the only thing that bacteriophages infect are bacteria. So we don't care if they do that, because they're just killing bacteria. That's good. We're trying to get them to do that. I mean, granted, there is some bacteria that we like the bacteria in our gut, but I mean, when you take an antibiotic, that fucks that up too, which, by the way, if ever you take antibiotics and that frigs up your, and you're having all sorts of digestive problems, actually, I think I still have some from the last time I was taking antibiotics. Or here, you see, probiotics, okay? You can buy them at the store, take them, with a 2-hour distance between your antibiotic dose. You can also, you know, there's a lot of probiotic foods. Like, that's why probiotics are important. And, you know, they're always showing, like, you know, the gold, like, you know, with the freaking Activia, whatever, the golden arrow. And actually, Activia, I was actually looking at the ingredients of various yogurts. They actually add other, because yogurt doesn't have all of the bacteria they need. They actually add the other ones. So that's good. Anyways, So that's why they're always advertising that shit, because I'm like, all yogurt has it, but I found out why they're actually advertising that. Anyways, so, you know, because you do need some bacteria in your gut to help you digest food, and if you don't, then, you know, you're gonna get C. difficile, and that's not a good time, and that's a superbug, so we're not gonna do that. Anyways, but speaking of antibiotics, you cannot treat a viral infection with antibiotics. So Donald Trump, you need to shut the fuck up by recommending mixing an antiviral with an antibiotic. All you're going to do is kill yourself and cause blindness and deafness and just stop. Just stop. Okay, you are in a position of authority. You cannot be spewing random shit you saw online. You need to be consulting the team of experts that you had better have, because people are looking to you for guidance, okay? There is no doctor on earth that would recommend that combination, okay? And if they do, they would lose their medical license when all their patients died. Obviously, it's not going to kill everyone, but it's going to kill enough of them to be a fucking problem. Don't mix an antiviral with antibiotics to fight a fucking viral infection. We don't have anything to treat this right now. That is why researchers around the world are focusing so hard on this. Like, we have some stuff in the early stages, and that's fantastic, but we don't have stuff that's already around and that just, you know, I'll just take this, it'll be fine. We're still in the testing phases, bud. Like, the early testing phases. Stop recommending shit as if it's a known. There's been no evidence about that. Not even early testing, nothing. It's not even one of the solutions that are being looked at. Because no one would recommend putting an antibiotic, especially not mixed with something else, because antibiotics are, you know, no fucking joke, which is why, you know, everyone fucking using antibiotics for a fucking cold is fucking bullshit. Anyway, their antibiotics are no fucking joke, and neither are antivirals, by the way, and then mixing them together and just hoping it works out for the best. Like, go fuck yourself. You're fucking dangerous. You're gonna get people killed, because they are gonna find some fucking doctor who is just, if you pay them enough, they will write any script, and then they might, you know, get scripts for 2 different names or whatever, and they're just gonna find some way of getting, because if the opioid crisis has shown us anything, it's that people can get drugs through legitimate channels if they want them, okay? Like, you're gonna get people killed, like, for fuck's sakes. Because people are scared right now. They're not thinking clearly. And it's really bad in the States because of Trump's fucking inaction. Because who had a fucking test? And it was cheap and effective. But they said, no, we have to have our own fucking test. Which delayed shit. Because it took time to develop. And it's not even that good. And it just... Ugh. And I'm not even American. We've had tests. In fact, when we were only at 33 cases nationwide, we're obviously way above that now. We're like well into the thousands. But when we only had 33 cases nationwide, more people had been tested in the province of BC alone than had been tested in the entire country of USA. Like, and the reason why this is making me angry and upset is because, first of all, there are people there, and I care about people, but also, like, there are people out there that I care about. Like, I have, you know, friends in the States, but also there are fucking, like, we closed our border to the States last, and because of the fact that we're right next to them. They are the only ones that we actually have a land border to. And we have a largely unguarded border. There are going to be people fleeing up here to try and get healthcare, to try and get tested, they're trying to get anything, because you're not fucking providing it. So if your country is full of cases, it's going to fuck us up too. So even for selfish reasons, I'm terrified because you're not doing enough. Because if the Trump administration has shown anything, it's that there are American refugees in Canada. Fuck's sakes, the first winter after Trump was elected, there were so many cases, like, in the news, like, eventually there was a media blackout on this, which, really Trudeau, but I digress. But for the first winter after Trump was elected, so like 2016 to 2017, there were stories and stories about people dying of hypothermia and getting frostbite. So people were risking life and limb traversing the Canadian wilderness to get into Canada away from the States because they were terrified of what the future held under Trump. And it went on. We were, occasionally we would get like finally a little story of these, military tents in the summertime being filled up and all this other stuff. It was a huge fucking problem that's probably, I don't even know if it's still going. And there were, when this shit started, there were all these people fleeing up to Canada to get, healthcare and testing and stuff like that. And that's been something that's been going on, healthcare in general, coming up to Canada. Like, we've been having healthcare refugees for a whole time, to the point that it's actually overburdening our healthcare system. Like, the insulin shit, we can't keep up with the insulin production. Because, by the way, we make our own insulin. Like, this whole lie of how, like, you're subsidizing, the rest of the world is bullshit, okay? We don't get drugs from you. We make our own, or we buy it from something. Like, most of Europe gets their drugs from, Asia, or make their own, and then Canada make most of our own drugs. Like, insulin was invented at a Canadian university, so also this idea that these things have to be like, need the fucking capitalism to even come about. The majority of, new medical things are coming about from, non-capitalistic means, are coming about from people who actually just genuinely want to cure something because they care about it, because somebody if someone you cared about, died from this disease, or has been suffering, all these years from some sort of disease or whatever, wouldn't you be determined to make sure no one else suffers, or to help your suffering relative or whatever? Especially like maybe you have the genetics to to be more predisposed to it, because that's how a lot of them work. I mean, fuck's sakes, Banting sold his fucking thing for $1, which is about like $14 nowadays times, which patent to be clear, and he was doing it just because he was sick of seeing all these kids die, and like these were skeletons when they died because of their inability to absorb the blood sugar, the sugar from the foods they were eating. Like, they were starving to death while eating. It was horrifying. And we're seeing that still now because people can't afford the insulin. It's this artificial scarcity. And, Alexander Fleming, the guy who invented the polio vaccine, was that the guy from the antibiotics? Anyways, the guy who did I remember the quote, I don't remember the names, I'm really bad with names. The guy who invented the polio vaccine. So all the anti-vaxxers acting like, it's all for money and shit like this. The guy who invented the polio vaccine didn't patent it at all. He didn't make any money off of it. And when asked why he didn't patent it, because it seemed ludicrous to people who were like all about money, he said, he scoffed, he laughed. He's like, it'd be like patenting the sun. Because he just was seeing people dying and being disabled for life, and paralyzed and wasting away and being in these iron lungs and shit like this. And he just didn't want to see that anymore. And so he worked tirelessly to find this, because believe it or not, there are a lot of people who just don't like suffering and don't want people to suffer and want to help others. Like, believe it or not, that's actually the majority of people. Like, for example, I'm in two different fucking Facebook groups right now that are specifically, it's a community care groups for my city, just for my city, which has just barely over 1 million people in it, and that's just for Ottawa, okay? And one of them is the caremongering group, which is to combat all the scaremongering that's going on, so caremongering, whatever, and that's a nationwide movement that's even starting to spill out into other countries. So, like, people are seeing this crisis and they're panicking and they're, doing all this shit, but there are also a bunch of other people that are helping one another, that are fighting tirelessly to beat this, and that are, staying indoors to make sure that, even if they aren't at risk, to make sure that other people, like myself, I have severe asthma, so I'm at higher risk, or like, immunocompromised people, or people with heart conditions, or, et cetera, so that they can, not risk infection. There are also selfish people who are going to beaches and shit like this, but there are also a lot of people who are being selfless, or just trying to help, who, if they have resources just from whatever, they're offering it. To quote Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers.